This is Energy of Business Moments with Michael Stipe, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their business success into your life and business. Energy of Business Moments is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Michael Stipe.
Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Energy of Business Moment podcast. I am still your host, Michael Stein. And today I have got a treat for you. I've got another Michael for the show today. In fact, I was on this guy's show a few weeks ago. He is host of Long Shot Leaders, a great podcast. If you haven't tuned in, please listen to that. But Michael Stein is here with us today. He is the founder and CEO of Underdog, along with a lot of other really cool things that he does. He's a stand-up comedian. He's been in acting. He's done a lot of things. He's got another thing that he's working on right now. But what I really am excited about is talking about the kind of energy he brings to his own business and to his podcast show. So, Michael, welcome. Glad to have you here today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here with you and talk a little bit about business and that energy we bring to it. So before we get going in that, tell us a little bit more about you. I think the more diverse somebody is, the more interesting. We can go down so many different rabbit holes, but there's some great diversity you bring in terms of your experience. And tell us a little bit more about you and like what really floats your boat.
Okay. I'll try to give you like the 3.5-minute version of like, while I do a podcast called Long Shot Leaders, I consider myself a long shot because my grandmother escaped the Russian concentration camps. My dad was a New York street kid. He became a multimillionaire only to become homeless again. So we grew up in a large family and I was the youngest. And since, he took off, I had to sleep in the same room with my grandmother until I was 9 years old and hear that story about escaping the Russian concentration camps. So it was my bedtime story. And I was a premature kid, had ADD, ADHD, whatever they call it, that's what I was back then. I had dyslexia, a stutter, health issues. I didn't have any success other than making people laugh, at myself or others. And then I, saw the movie Rocky when I was 12 years old. And I said, here's a guy like me. He's funny. He keeps on trying. He's not successful, but he's physically fit and I'm not. So I started working out every day. By the time I came 16, I was a physical fitness trainer. That was my job when I was in high school. And then told my tutor, I said, hey, I know what I want to do. I want to be an entrepreneur, an actor, and a stand-up comedian. And she's like, you might want to work with your hands, be a gardener or something, because not everybody's meant to do what they want to do. I said, screw you. My dad never finished the 8th grade and became a multi-millionaire. Granted, he's living in a van right now, but other than that, he did pretty well. So I said, I started my own business the day after high school, failed miserably. And I picked up, 6 months later and I did stand-up comedy. I was 19 and I brought a lot of people there. It was a good show. But I said, you're not going to make money as a stand-up comedian right away. You've got to find a way to make money. So I said, dance clubs are really big. It's late 80s. I said, I brought a lot of people to this comedy show. So I started promoting dance clubs and I became the number one nightclub promoter in my age bracket 6 months later, promoting nightclubs. And from there, I was able to get involved in acting more. I met a lot of people. My first acting role was playing Dirt Diggler in the Dirt Diggler story, which became the movie Boogie Nights, which I appear in as well. And from there, I was able to make my own films and left the nightclub industry to become a production assistant. And I made an award-winning short film that got bought by HBO and got me a lot of deals in Hollywood, but no movie deal because I had a lot of screenplays. I wrote 5 screenplays at that point. I've written 8. And they said, they got close to a movie deal with one of my screenplays for me to direct it. But red tape didn't happen. So I said, screw you guys. I'm going to make my own film to make, instead of you guys waiting on you to get the money and all that. Only problem is I was broken in debt. So, because usually filmmakers are, and I didn't have that nightclub money anymore. So I said, I got to be an entrepreneur again to make money for this movie I want to make. And I started selling tarps on the internet because there's a reason why. But sold tarps, and within a year, I made $500,000, and I was able to make enough money to make that movie which starred Faye Dunaway, Andy Dick, and Coolio, and many other actors. And it did well, won some awards, but it didn't make a lot of money. And I said, yeah, I'm going to take care of this business that has done so well for me. And I'm still able to do stand up because of it. So since that business has made over $100 million and continues to grow. And I said, if I was ever to do a podcast, it would be about people that have had overcome large obstacles to find success. And that's why I do a show called Long Shot Leaders. That's why I'm talking here today.
Awesome. I love the story of how people get to where they are today. And especially the ones that are non-traditional. And especially when people overcome adversity in some way. And you shared about a bunch of different challenges that a normal business owner has, or even an individual has getting going. So in the spirit of our show, we talk about the energy we bring, the thoughts, the emotions, the actions we take as an entrepreneur, business owner, even just a leader in the business space. And what's so fascinating to me and to our listeners here is, what was it that got you past that low moment, or what was it that keeps you going? What are those highs that you get out of your business? So, Michael, how about you share with us a story or two about what gets you going, what keeps you going, that emotional high that you get from running your business?
Well, initially it was desperation. I'm not hireable because I just compared to how much scale I want to make, how much money I want to make. So that's what really motivated me. What motivated me is I wanted to make that movie. I used to tell people this is my business, this is my movie business. But I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. My dad was an entrepreneur. His dad was an entrepreneur. They succeeded, but all failed. My thing I wanted to do was make sure I succeed over a long term. And I saw that happen when my dad's business partner was in the late 60s, was a tool guy. They sold tools. Business didn't do well. My dad left to go make millions in selling calculators on a mail order campaign that he created. Blew it all with a crazy lifestyle, portraying the loosely based character on Burt Reynolds' character in Boogie's Nights, loosely based on my dad. Basically, he blew it all. That business partner that he had in the late 60s ended up making a company in 1975 called Harbor Freight. And he did really well. So I saw this rich dad, poor dad thing. So what kept me is like, I want to do what my dad did, but I want to have a sustained, success. And so desperation in the beginning and a desire to do something else, what a means of what money can bring you. It's something that I feel really passionate about at the time. Now, what gets me going day to day or hour to hour, what pushes me along is it's a sport. And it's also a means, it's like, if I do this, I try to leverage other things in my business. Film, everything helps everything else. So like stand-up comedy, believe it or not, can help me in my business. My business can help me with stand-up comedy. If I have written a screenplay eventually, if I make X amount, how can I make a movie again and not take as much risk as I did with Love Hollywood Style, which was, a lot of money. How can I execute certain things? I try to keep things that, jazz me and create and keep me creative. And I think about them. So like, I try to make sure I don't go, out of my way like a squirrel, for a nut, but I try to say, how can this, with the path of least resistance, help the other thing? And okay, now I don't feel guilty about doing that crazy thing. And also that motivates, it's like, well, sometimes I'll be more motivated about stand-up comedy than I will be my business. It just happens, I feel guilty, but that's not a bad feeling to feel. Certain times I'm like, no, I'm really into my business right now. Right now I'm really into my business because we're launching a company called Bolator, which is like going to change a lot, and I know what, after all these years, I know what to expect. So I know what moves me emotionally. So, and I use that to my advantage to drive my emotion is what drives you, so I use that as a tool. I think that answers the question.
Oh, it totally answers the question. And for a lot of people, it's what is it that drives you? And you talked about, hey, I know what my passion is. And what also is very clear is we talk about, hey, as we get older, we get hopefully wiser. So you learn some things, right? You learn from your failures and you grow from them, hopefully. And so you clearly absorbed that. But what was interesting, of course, is you know what you need to do, know what motivates you. And so that passion for earning that money and not being like your dad and losing the money on the backside. So all of that, it drives and is instrumental in pushing us forward. So that was great advice. Well, how about on the other side? Like, let's talk a little bit about like, yeah, a setback, a blow to our business. Talk to us about how that felt for you emotionally, right? And then how did you work through that? How long did it take, and where did you get on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different setbacks and blows that I've had, and you just, without getting specific on any particular one, because there's like so many. If you enter into business, and the more businesses that you enter in, whether it's nightclub business or whether it's online business, you're going to hit issues, and everything's always difficult in the beginning, and you're going to hit a lot of volatility in the beginning, and then after you put processes, automations, and leveraging in place, kind of you're going to have less problems. But when you don't do that and there's the volatility, so whenever I have those situations come up, I've had, situations where, oh man, this was a stupid mistake, just over an oversight. Like, for example, I'll share one with you. I was a production assistant, and I did that film, and I had a really bad accountant he was a great accountant that came over with his laptop and did my accounting for when I was a production assistant and in film commercials. But he was not a person to be my accountant for my business that just took off out of nowhere and started just growing like crazy. He couldn't handle all the just so many moving parts to a business as opposed to that. So he was in and over his head, and I was, in default, because I was like, well, he's going to get to it. He's going to get to it. I'm like, even I didn't know at the time. I was like, this is not right. I don't think this is right. I mean, I know about taxes enough to know that you need to pay, at the end of the tax year, otherwise you're going to have a problem. So you think but it got past me. Luckily I had a great year during one of these hurricanes. And I was like the guy that you saw in the helicopter when all those blue roofs. I'm like, that was my work. So when I made all that money, it's like, great, you made all this money. You're going to owe this money in taxes. By the way, because I got a new accountant. He's like, and this was like a big firm now. And they're like, yeah, you're in default for about $250,000. And I was like, taxes and penalties. I was like, okay, now that's a lot of pain. That really hurt, but I made some really good money, that year, and I was able to absorb it and then some, and then expand. So I said, what can I learn from this? If I'm going to spend that money, right? I'm like, how am I going to spend it? That's why I look at it. I was like, how can I look at that? So I asked myself empowering questions and to answer it a long way, which is really emotionally difficult at the time, but I was working, it's like working out. So I was like, okay, what can I learn from this? What's great about this? There's nothing great about losing $250,000. No. What's funny about this? What can I do? How can I use this? All the empowering questions I could stack on there. Granted, I'm not hiding the fact I was pissed off and bummed out. I spent enough time there, but I only tried to spend like 5 or 10% there. 90% is me trying to ask empowering questions so I can enable that. If I have to go through that, then you want to be able to use it. My daughter, to answer this question, and I'll close that question out with this. She had, we're like Jewish people in like this is really going off the deep end, but in Texas here in Georgetown, and she goes to school in Liberty Hill, just outside of town, and there's no Jewish people there. And somebody said something really scary and negative to her. And I said, you know what? I said, use that. I said, use it to your advantage. Try to ask yourself empowering questions that will lead to a positive. If I had to pay $250,000, well, maybe I'll write a joke about it. Maybe I'll write a book about it. Maybe make it, I could use it somewhere. If it's going to cost you, learn from it. So I try to find myself saying that all day long. I've said that my whole life. That's what comedians do. You try to bring lightness to the darkness, and that's what, you try to do in personal development as well. So, boy, that was a long one. That was a long-winded one. I rambled.
Oh no, yeah, but what is amazing, of course, is you've coached yourself. Like in a coaching world, like we do that. We ask empowering questions, and so you've obviously gotten to the point where you're like, yeah, I could be very convergent in my focus and look at the $250,000 loss and just focus on that and get sucked into the energy of looking at that. Or I can ask myself some empowering questions like, okay, what can I do with this? What can I learn from it? What, man, glad it was 250,000 and not 2.5 million on my next thing. Because man, that's a lot of taxes.
Right.
It's like, that it's just all we're doing is we're creating a divergent focus instead of that convergent focus. And that opens up opportunity really. And that mindset of being able to shift and seeing what else is out there is so critical, because if you can't adapt in business when you have those setbacks, you're going to get stuck still staring at that $250,000 loss. And guess what? You're going to be in that van down the road because you haven't broken out of that trap.
Yeah. Crazy 3 year, like a 2 year period, 2 or 3 year period, because I was broken in debt when I started my business, and then it had rapid growth. And then then I had that. And I was like, oh my God, I went from nothing to that's going to be actual. That wasn't the tax payment. That was additional to the tax payment I had to pay that year. I said, this is crazy. Life is just unpredictable sometimes, but you don't know what you don't know. That's the part that's the scariest part. When you don't know what you don't know. Even today, you and I are having this nice, wonderful discussion here, and we could be making better choices. And that's the part that scares you, what you don't know yet.
Right. And that's a great segue into why you need to have a mentor. Our job, at the Strategic Advisory Board is to do that kind of thing, is to provide that mentorship for somebody. So you don't know what you don't know. So maybe you can talk to somebody else about it. And I'm sure you've got mentors in your space, and you've learned to go back to them and ask for some advice and help, because probably that's the biggest thing is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Success, Tony Robbins, big fan of his. I've done everything he's ever done. Been Fiji, and I've done the whole nine. And I will tell you that, he says when somebody's getting the results that you want, or you want to model somebody, try to model the best, try to find that very best person you could find, success leaves clues. So model them as much as possible. What you want has probably already been done, or close thereof. What you want has already been done. So just find out how they did it, and see if you can get access to them the closest way and get those clues.
Oh man, that is great stuff. Yeah. Success has clues. Wow. So speaking of that, as a podcast host, obviously you've had a lot of great guests on your show. What stands out for you energetically, like as a high or low, that this was like, wow, that's a really interesting story. What stands out for you?
Well, the number one story that I've ever had on the podcast was in the beginning. I interviewed a guy named Ben Lesser, who was a Holocaust survivor, and he went through a Tour de France of freaking hell. So, being a Jewish guy, and hearing that Russian concentration camp story every day when I was a kid, there's a lot of Pavlov conditioning there. And I was like, oh God, this is really hard to do. But I was like, I was really happy to do it, And so that one was a big thing for me. But then speaking to people like, Carl Gottlieb, who wrote Jaws, he wrote the screenplay, and he's actually in the movie too. And Jeff Ark, who wrote Sleepless in Seattle, being a filmmaker, I was like, yeah, freaking podcast. You do a podcast, you get to talk to a lot of these people. I never talked to those guys before. I talked to a lot of people before, but now I'm getting to have a nice conversation with them over a sustained amount of time. And the data set and 370 episodes at this point, and I got to talk to you, a few weeks ago, and I get to pick your brain about the energy leadership and out of Dad's box, and find out about why you wrote that book. And it's an algorithm. I keep on talking about this algorithm on my show about I get to be the invasion of mind snatchers, and I get to get in this people's brain, and people say, well, are you learning everything that they do? No, you're not learning everything, because you're not a sponge, but your subconscious is recording a lot. So I know for a fact that this podcast is, and it's different than just listening to a podcast, because when you're doing the podcast, you have to think a little differently with having a conversation. When I talk to you, when you did my podcast, I'm concentrating on Michael's words and trying to empathize every step of the way as he's going, which means, and it's just because that's like the way I like to communicate. So, but the thing is that I'm learning so much. That is, to me, when you go back to the mentor part of it, I'm getting rapid fire mentorship, with this a data set that is, pretty damn interesting. So that's really a big advantage.
Yeah, and obviously it arms you a little bit. And as you said, the subconscious, like when you get that situation that comes up in the future, you'll kind of know, you'll have a better sense of what direction to go because of all that. Maybe you can't remember the specific one, the specific episode or the story, but you have all that data, and like it's instantaneous where you're like, I think we need to go this direction. I don't know why, can't put my finger on it, but I think that's where we need to go.
Right. And, people really, the power of the subconscious. If you don't know about this, and hypnotherapy and self-hypnosis, it's really great. If you're trying to learn something, listen to a recording of it at night before you go to sleep and in the morning when you wake up. Your subconscious, and even if you're half drowsy, your subconscious records these things. It's very powerful. It's so I used to, because I got the ADHD or whatever they want to call it, I don't pay too much heed to it, although they're whatever they describe that is. I got it's dead ringer, but I tried to really, have faith that my subconscious is recording a lot. And the more that you expose yourself to more information and data, and you're open to that, the more your subconscious will record it. And it is going to affect your consciousness level and your psyche and how you make decisions, especially with business.
Oh yeah, so true. And what's interesting, Michael, is I have my coaching work. I've come along across a lot of entrepreneurs now who will be like, yeah, I'll set an intention before I go to bed at night because I want to reprogram my subconscious. I'm like, dude, 15 years ago, nobody was saying that, and it's becoming much more prominent. And so you just touched on something I hadn't thought of in a while. But yeah, it's really interesting how that trend is changing.
Yeah, it's awesome. There's like so many interesting changes going on right now with back in the 80s, I got to tell you, I think people are smarter now in the sense that you're like, no, I think they were smarter then. In some senses, the consciousness level of what's happening to people now is because, there's so much social, websites, and you're seeing at such a rapid clip. Just scrolling through TikTok or Facebook, you're like, Mike, can that be good? Yeah, it can, because you're getting like a amount of data and information. Is like, this is how this person reacts. This is how a person reacts. And then we're getting in real time. We're looking at comment section, and this is how society all looks at that. And that's recorded. It's like, what? I would thank God, I wasn't famous in the 80s or anything. I'm famous now, but I'm saying, didn't make, because you would make such silly mistakes. And I think the consciousness level of social things are much more tuned than they were because of all this information we're getting. And it's hitting critical mass. It just keeps on getting faster and faster as time goes on. A month now is much faster than a month it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And, the one saying of like, surround yourself with good people with the right talent. Part of that too is that social media piece. So get that consciousness that the comments that people make of the people you'd want to surround yourself with, and you're gonna change. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, peer group, major peer group. You can kind of, it's good to have personal, one-on-one real peer group. But like if you're remote and there's a lot of people in your area, at least you could go to your peer group, close to the rub, through social.
Yeah, good. Well, Michael, we've had some really great discussions here. What if people want to get a hold of you? If you want to talk about anything you got coming up, how can they do so?
Just go to, you're the first person I get to say this to, because we should just have the website called Longshot Leaders. And just today, I just launched michaelsteinmedia.com. So there is no more longshotleaders.com. It's michaelsteinmedia.com. Longshot Leaders podcast page is on there, but also the Stein Time show, which I'm launching next month, is on that website. We're talking to a lot of comedians and a lot of filmmakers, more entertainment driven, more, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde on my personality. This is business today. So I'm like, I compartmentalize, like, who the fuck is this guy? Sorry, I don't know. But that's what the Stein Time show is. And then you'll also see on there the Bolator podcast The company I'm starting at the end of the year is called Bolator. It's a whole new family of products, a whole new lifestyle brand, patented products that is launching. It's called Bolator. And the podcast is going to interview outdoor adventurers that are going to tell their near-death outdoor adventure stories. And that launches at the end of the year. So you could just go to Michael Stein Media. If you got a long shot story, let us know on michaelsteinmedia.com. And then we will, see if it's a good story for us for you to be on the show, and that would be fun. But that's how you could find me.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Well, absolute pleasure having you on today. Great discussion, great sharing of great ideas. Thanks for being on the show, and we'll definitely be staying in touch.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Energy of Business Moments with your host, Michael Sipe. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.